Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you today about how Jan Smuts is not a traitor. He wasn't out for his own personal gain. He didn't help the British during the Boer War. He was not a corrupt individual. He was a very good statesman. He was a hero. Some of his domestic policies, particularly towards black, Indian, and colored South Africans, left a lot to be desired. But they weren't as intense and strict as the national party's rules. And had Jan Smuts gotten reelected in 1948, the person that was running as the deputy prime minister said majority rule is inevitable and we need to try to transition towards that. So majority rule in South Africa may have happened sooner under Smuts than it would have under the National Party, obviously. But we're going to talk about how he's not a traitor to the Afrikaners. He was a hero, and he was a man of principle in a lot of ways. Now, sometimes he let the general public's opinion get in the way of what he wanted to do, but for the most part, he didn't. Let me explain. All right. He was a big-time Anglophile at first. He had a love and affinity for the UK, thought the UK could do no wrong. When he was at Stellenbosch, or Victoria College, soon as Stellenbosch University. Well, then after that, he had a lawyer position in the Western Cape province. And he admired Cecil John Rhodes. He admired Cecil Rhodes a lot. Well, what changed his thinking there is when Cecil Rhodes ordered the Jameson raid. The raid was ordered on December 27th, 1895, and ended on January 2nd, 1896. Jan Smuts was disgusted by that. And what the Jameson raid is that the Jameson raid was trying to, there were a handful of English-speaking miners, English-speaking South African miners in the Transvaal and the Free State. They were called the Uitlanders, the Uitlanders. Well, the Cecil John Rhodes tried to get munitions to that area and encourage an English South African uprising, but there wasn't that much heavy discrimination against English South Africans in Transvaal or in the Free State. And it looked like that, to Jan Smuts, Cecil John Rhodes was trying to conquer the Transvaal or the Free State. And he was also sickened by a lot of the discrimination a lot of the Afrikaners felt against the British in the Western Cape at the time. He didn't face discrimination as much, but a lot of other Afrikaners did. So what he did was he went to Transvaal and worked under Paul Kruger. And he had a pretty good setup as a lawyer in the Western Cape, but he gave all that up because he felt like what Cecil Rhodes was doing was wrong, and what he needed to do was right. Well, shortly after that happened, the Second Boer War came about, and Jan Smuts chose to side with the Afrikaners in the Boer War. He fought against the British and fought very fiercely. He chose surprise guerrilla tactics, and he was able to locate a lot of British encampments and charge on the encampments when the British soldiers were relaxing, and actually took a lot of British soldiers as prisoners of war. And he was one of the most, the British document him as being one of the most difficult adversaries to face. Well, he did surrender during time, suffered time in a concentration camp, but when the war ended, he championed reconciliation because he believed, because the British defeated the Afrikaners in the Boer War, despite the Afrikaners' best efforts, that they would need to make peace with the British Empire, but have some sort of independence and political autonomy. Well, the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910. And they belong to the British Commonwealth of Nations. So, like, if the UK went to war, typically South Africa would go to war on their side, but South Africa still had an independent form of government. And South Africa did not have to agree with the UK on everything. Like, prime example, while South Africa went to World War I on the side of the UK, and I believe they made the right decision there, Jan Smuts opposed the Treaty of Versailles, and he was allowed to do that, and he was very critical about that treaty. I mean, he was, plain and simple, he was. And World War II, and he was defense minister at the time during World War I. Louis Botha was South Africa's first prime minister, but when Jan Smuts was defense minister of South Africa in World War I, he actually rode into battle with a lot of the soldiers. He didn't just sit behind a desk and do a lot of things there. Particularly at first, he rode into a lot of battles with a lot of the soldiers, and he actually helped wrestle German Southwest Africa, which is present-day Namibia, away from German control and into South African control. Now, there were some things at the time that Jan Smuts, like, he eventually signed on and supported the Indian Relief Act. And now, Indian South Africans were brought from India to South Africa. Some came voluntarily, some didn't, as indentured servants of the British Empire. And some, they settled largely in the KwaZulu-Natal province. Well, some of them wanted to get out of indentured servitude, but in order to do that, you had to pay a 3 English pound tax to do that. And at the time, that was a decent amount of money. Well, Jan Smuts helped end the Indian Relief Act. Actually, Jan Smuts and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer in South Africa for a while. Jan Smuts and Gandhi helped form a friendship during that time. Now, there were some, like Jan Smuts also supported the Native Land Act of 1913, which removed a lot of black South Africans from their homes, and white South Africans. And even though the apartheid government borrowed a lot from the Native Land Act of 1913. I mean, it really did. Now, Jan Smuts later, and particularly after World War II, changed a lot of his views of black South Africans for the better. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things Jan Smuts, in some cases, would not go against the general public. In some cases, he would. So he was a human being. He had flaws, just like anybody else, but overall, he was a hero. He was an avid reader. The library was a sanctuary, and couldn't anybody go into the library. Now, he would invite you in there, and he would invite anybody pretty much into his library, but he had to invite you in there first. And if you could get, he could tell anybody just get any book off the shelf, and then open it to a certain page, read a few sentences, and he could tell which book it was from. He was that avid of a reader. Jan Smuts was. When World War II came around, Jan Smuts, he actually unseated J.B.M. Hertzog as Prime Minister of South Africa, and chose to side with the Allies in World War II. South Africa was one of the first countries to ally with Britain during World War II, and South Africa performed very well during World War II. In the Battle of Britain, the Battle of El Alamein, the Battle of Britain, El Alamein, and several other campaigns. The Warsaw Airlift, as I've talked about in previous videos. And the South Africans did well in that war. And Churchill was a correspondent during the Boer War for a newspaper. Well, Churchill and Jan Smuts, Churchill actually became a prisoner of war, because when he tried to help save a train from being captured by Afrikaners, he actually helped get the train back on track. But the train left Churchill and a few other British soldiers behind, so he was Jan Smuts' prisoner. But the two formed a friendship, and Churchill, aside from his family, he had Jan Smuts' picture on his desk, and he was one of the first. Jan Smuts was one of the few non-family members that Churchill had a picture of on his desk. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Take care, bless, and bye-bye.